Okay. We might make an official start, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you aboard for the journey. We are in the Welcome to Teaching Online webinar with April Taylor. So a little bit of housekeeping and then I'll introduce April and we'll be on our way. So just for clarity, if you are interested in having the course NESA registered, what will happen, basically we've been a little overwhelmed with the enrollments for these courses. So we've had to set up some different systems. So essentially at the end of this webinar or end of watching this webinar, there'll be an opportunity to enroll. We'll capture your details and then sometime in the next couple of weeks, you'll get an email letting you know that you've actually been enrolled through the TTA site. And at that point, you'll be able to go through, do a reflection question and give us some feedback and you'll get the NESA registered PD. So don't fret if you haven't heard anything about that in the next couple of weeks. It's just taking us, we've got a big backlog. We've had over 6,000 enrollments into the webinars. So we've got a little bit of a backlog there. Also, April will go quite quickly. So don't be concerned about that. You're going to be able to get the recording of this after and watch it again and pause and rewind, etc. So April will pack in a lot and anything you miss, you'll be able to catch on the second or third time through. It's going to be run kind of like a classroom, which will be really interesting. So April's up for that challenge. I'm sure she'll do a fantastic job of that, which will be a bit different from the other webinars. I'm going to be around helping, having a look at the Q&A and the chat, and generally trying to help things out, maybe getting back to some of your questions and chats that you have. So without any further delay, I want to introduce April. April has a background in history teaching, and what she has on ahead of almost all of us is that she actually started teaching online a few years ago. So what we're trying to learn in a few days, April's had a few years to hone her skills. And so she's very kindly agreed to share some of those skills with us. So without any further delay, I am going to stop sharing my screen so that April can share her screen. And
Thank you. So like you said, my name is April Taylor and I work for a school called One School Global Australia, and I am the head of campus at the Mount Victoria campus. There are 11 campuses throughout New South Wales. I have been an online teacher using different platforms for, well, since officially 2016, used Cisco video conferencing, GoToMeeting, Zoom meetings, LMSs. We've used Moodle. I've used a little bit of Google Classroom, very little, Canvas, Microsoft Suite. So tried lots of different things. I do, of course, have my favorites, but I obviously am speaking for myself, not for any organization. So I'm just here to give you my 2 cents and my experience, and hopefully that will help you guys in any issues you might be facing. You are adults and you can eat in class. Chrissy, that's perfectly fine and acceptable. I will watch the chat. If you have questions that you're comfortable for the whole group to see your question, please make it available to everyone at different points. It is perfectly fine for me to accept questions if you want me to clarify anything. You'll notice that I stop sharing my screen when I want to answer questions. It's just because it is easier for me to concentrate on answering the question when I'm looking at you. So there's just a few things that you might notice that I do when I'm teaching that may be obvious, or maybe you think you want to know why I'm doing it that way. Just ask. I might not be able to, I might not be conscious of everything that I'm doing because I just do it. If you're having sound issues, there's a little bit of a chat happening, so that's really nice, those of you that are helping the people out who are having some issues. At the very least, at the bottom left, you'll see the mute. There's a little arrow, a little caret, and that is where you change your sound. So those of you that are helping out people with audio issues, that's where it is if you haven't found it. So I am going to, at this point, share my screen and start giving you information. One thing that I know that I do when I am teaching is that I talk my students through every single little thing that I'm doing, because you'll notice that before you share your screen, your kids can't see anything but you looking around your screen. So I do constantly tell you every move that I'm making, just so that it is a little bit easier. Miles, can you please watch the chat for me while I'm sharing the screen?
Absolutely.
Just because it's a little bit hard to see the chat when I'm sharing.
You can trust me completely.
Thank you. So the very first thing we're going to do is a little bit of an activity to kind of gauge the room, get you comfortable. Hopefully it will set you off on the right track, to be very honest. I would like you to have a go at trying to share your vulnerabilities and also your hopes. So this is a protocol called the Fears and Hopes. It's a very good one to use whenever you're starting anything in the classroom. We are going to do this using a Google Doc. So Miles is going to put the link to that Google Doc inside of the chat. So make sure that you have clicked at the bottom of your Zoom. When you see the little window, it'll sit at the top of your screen right now, but when I'm not sharing, it'll just be the toolbar at the bottom. So you'll need to click the chat to access that Google Doc. What you're going to be doing is, once you go to that, we have a space for you all to put some information in. There are 2 questions I would like you to answer relating to your fears and your hopes. So the first question is, if this were the worst PD you have ever attended, what will happen or not happen? What's that going to look like? If it's the absolute worst, what's going to happen in this PD to make it the worst? And the second question, if it was the best PD you've ever attended, what will be its outcomes? So if you think about what we're trying to achieve here, what will the outcomes be if it's the best? So when you do this, I would appreciate if you would stick it in on the Google Doc, create a text box. So you're going to create a text box on the Google Doc, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. So you will see that there's some people that have already started to put it in. And obviously there's some animals, because in Google Docs, if you aren't logged in, it just shows up as animals. I think that is actually hilarious, and we should all do that and just be named animals. So thank you to those people who are sharing their vulnerabilities, their fears, and their hopes. Okay, so we have some worse things. Death by PowerPoint. I really do not love PowerPoint myself. Sometimes it is the most practical way to be able to do things. We've got blah, 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 boredom. Yep. Some, nodding off, not learn anything new, read lots of PowerPoint slides to me. Yep. New tactic. So what are the fears? No new learning. Okay, so we've obviously got a lot of the same things, which are every bad PD that we go to. And then some of the hopes we've got is that walk away with less apprehension, feeling excited and engaged, something you can immediately implement into teaching and learning. So I'll go back and have a look at those later. So when we are looking at your what we are thinking, what Miles and I were thinking about what you guys would want from this. So we're assuming that you've already been a little bit into the online teaching, and you're looking to actually start feeling like you can start teaching rather than just giving the kids work and them doing their work. Can you give me a thumbs up if that's kind of you? You want to move beyond just assigning work. You want actual authentic learning to take place in your classrooms. That's why you're here. So I have come up with 5 areas that hopefully I can be of some use to you in the ways that I feel I am able to do that inside of my classroom. And there are some of you, I think, that were not able to get into the Google Doc. The whole point was to give you an idea of something you can do in your classroom to collaborate and to have the students share their thinking. That was really the main point of being able to do something like that. So straight away, something to do in the beginning of the lesson to engage your students in a collaborative way that you can see what they're doing in real time. So I've got 5 areas that are my learning intentions for what I'm hoping that I can give you in this session. So tips on how you yourself can thrive. As a teacher, how do you thrive in that? planning realistic lessons for students. So what should they look like, or can they look like? And organizing engaging video conferencing lessons, using the tools in Zoom effectively, and creating a safe virtual environment. Like Miles said, I will have a lot that I will give you. A lot of the stuff that I've got on here are the things that I do to try to do this myself in my classroom. There will be a lot of words on the slide, but that is the best way I can give you the information that I have for you in this short amount of time. But like I said, please feel free to ask me questions. If there's a question in the chat while I'm sharing, just Miles, just tell me and I can stop and answer the question. So, how do you thrive? And what I've done is I've put it into bold, my big tips on how you as a teacher can thrive in this. So you need to first of all remember your why. Why are you a teacher in the first place? Just because you've been thrust into this remote learning environment does not necessarily mean you have to give up who you are as a teacher. I don't like when people feel like they have to compromise who they are as a teacher and why they're actually in the room just because they've gone into a remote environment. Majority of my teaching is just like this. This is how I teach most of my students without COVID-19. So why did you become a teacher? And whatever that is, whatever that drives you and makes you excited and passionate should still exist for you with a little creativity. You can still build relationships with your kids. Please don't feel you need to give that up. You just have to allow yourself the time. Give yourself permission to have those moments during each lesson to laugh with the kids, to tell jokes. Yesterday, I was running a year 12 modern history lesson. My kids are all across the state. And my dog, I have a Whippet. And I was at home for that lesson. And my little Whippet, he was destroying a toy on the floor next to me, and the entrails of that little toy were all over the kitchen. So I started fussing at my dog while I had my mic on, and the students were laughing hysterically. So today they asked me if my dog was okay, and we had a couple of minutes chatting about my naughty dog who murdered his little toy friend. It's like a little moose. So give yourself that time to build those relationships with the kids. Don't feel like you have to spend the entire 53 minutes or so filling it with content. You do not need to do that in the online world. The kids they themselves are dying for this, the connections that you're able to make. So please don't give that up. Be comfortable with an audience. I know Miles and I were talking last week about something that some teachers had expressed worry about, that they're afraid that somebody's going to be sitting next to the kids, like a parent or somebody else will be sitting and criticizing. You know what? Just give that up. Don't worry about who you're trying to impress when you're teaching online. It is, you will not 100% of the time in your teaching make every single person, every administrator, every parent, every student happy all the time. As long as you know that you are doing what is right as a teacher and you are feeling confident and you're not saying things that are not okay and you're not doing things that are not okay, don't even worry. The feedback we've gotten from parents since our kids are sitting in the studies and the kitchen tables is that parents are just so impressed by what the teachers are doing. You will probably find the same experience, that the parents that you are serving are probably so impressed by what you're doing. They're probably sitting there because they miss being in school themselves. That's what we're hearing. I keep having to tell one of my parents to please stop interjecting. You're not actually in high school anymore. Can you please stop giving the answers? And it becomes a joke. So that's my advice for that one, is just try the best you can to just ignore anything outside of you and your kids. And the no-brainer one, which is really weird, I've been doing this, like I said, for a number of years. The no-brainer is to actually get up and stretch and look off into the distance. I forget to go to the bathroom when I'm teaching online. I will go 6 hours and stand up and feel awful and realize it's because I literally did not get up from my seat all day long. Because you go from teaching and then you open up your windows and you start doing your compliance documentation, you start marking and you start checking emails and you just don't get up. So the obvious one that is really not as obvious as it sounds, just get up, stretch. I have a garden outside of my window. I have to remind myself to look off into the distance. You will probably have found that in the last couple of weeks, you are more tired than you have probably ever been in your teaching career. You probably have found that teaching one lesson in an online class, if you teach a whole time on Zoom or Teams or Skype or whatever you're using, you've probably found that that is more taxing for you than teaching 4 periods in a row of a year 7 class. It's your eyes. So you have got to remember to just look off into the distance. And it will sound ridiculous, but that's a huge thing that we don't do enough. Does anyone have any questions on any of those things? They probably sound like no-brainers, but we need those reminders. So getting into some of my tips for planning realistic lessons for students. Number one, be realistic and flexible with your timing. What can be done in a face-to-face lesson can either be much slower or much quicker in the online environment. Be intentional. Some of these I'll go into more detail with the tips. Be intentional. Figure out what you must do and take everything else out. Don't get rid of your creative stuff. Don't get rid of the stuff that makes you excited to teach. Don't get rid of the inquiry. Get rid of the things like you standing in front of the students and talking for 20 minutes. Get rid of that. Give them a flipped lesson. So get rid of anything that does not have to be done and scale back. Provide students with an outline of what is expected for a week or a fortnight, and I've got a couple of examples to show you of how I do that. Provide them opportunities for thinking and provide them opportunities for collaboration. So if you think about 5 things you need to do to have realistic lessons for your kids, those are the 5 things. I have a son who is 9 and a daughter who is 13, and they are so confused a lot of the time about what they're actually supposed to be doing at any given time. All it takes is a little bit of organization to send to them. So when I talk about being intentional, this means go back to the syllabus dot points and skills. What do you have to teach them? Ask yourself, can I flip it? Can I give the students a reading or a video to watch before the lesson, video conferencing lesson? Then use the video conference lesson as a Q&A. So if you've got a lesson of, a lesson of whatever year group and class you teach on Monday, and then you're going to see them again on Tuesday. On Monday, give them like a self-directed style lesson where they have to read materials or watch you teaching on a video. And then when you come, use it as a question and answer. You just be creative in how you're using those video lessons that you're able to get. Does each student need to be given the same activity? A lot of the learning management systems that you probably have access to have those strands, a la NAPLAN style testing. They have the strands that as the kids are able to master something, it will put them on a new mastery path. You know your students. If you see that they're going through work quickly that you're giving them, give them something that maybe is a little bit more challenging. Give them something that asks them to justify their ideas or to create something for you, and they take a picture and send it. So think about, do you need to be giving each kid that same packet of work, those same activities? Would you do it in your face-to-face class? If you wouldn't, try to change it up in the online as well. And then the one that is probably the most important for me, what is the best way to make this engaging and for you to enculturate curiosity? How can you get the kids to want to be in your class, to want to think about the things that successfully did that for you in face-to-face? You'll probably find they will transfer into the online environment with a little bit of tweaking and knowing the tools available to you. Does anyone have any questions? I see that, Chrissy, about the practical. We have not figured that out ourselves on how we can do that. We're looking into things like waivers and permission notes to do it at home, having moments where the kids can come into campus in small groups. But I think that's a good one. Get the kids to take their pictures and send them send in what they're doing. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, well, I just wanted that little bit of engagement and that more interactive sort of thing, because I just find that just disseminating work, I'm not modifying and I'm not keeping them engaged and making them feel like they're a part of it. So I'm even thinking little online videos of, hi guys, I'm at the ag plot, blah, 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 and showing them around and what's happening, and we're expecting some lambs to be born and that sort of thing. And I've brought the worm farm so I can show them how I'm making the worm tea and stuff. But yeah, that's my struggle, sort of the really missing the prac side of things and feeling like the kids are missing that hands-on stuff.
And I think that is awesome what you're doing. I mean, that's a very creative way of using the tools available to you. And the kids are going to be so excited to see your face. I think the best thing that's going to come out of this is the kids are going to be desperate to come back to school.
Yeah, the poor darlings. So they got one the other day that was entitled, haven't done my hair, no makeup deal. But yeah.
That's okay.
But yeah, they were fine.
Hey, April.
Yep.
Yeah, I was having the thought as well. I mean, I used to teach design and technology, and I was thinking, wow, there will be certain subjects out there that are very challenging to do right now. But I guess everyone, whatever your subject matter is, it's all, yeah, there will be clever ways. You've just got to get very creative.
Our maths department was saying that yesterday. They were finding it really challenging to do explanation for maths sort of over the internet.
We use OneNote heavily.
Yeah.
And the same thing can be done with a Google Doc where you can draw on it. So that's how our math teachers do it.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah. And sharing screens. Does anyone else have any questions or want to share your thinking and wondering if it'll work in relation to that? Okay, so here I've just given, and I recognize the text is pretty small because it's a screenshot of my Canvas course. So these are just a couple of examples that I've created in my courses. So I give it to them in a table, and this one is mapped out for, it's a year 12 course, so it's mapped out for the topic. So what they get is they get a week. We tell them the syllabus. So this is syllabus, the survey. So we number them. So we have a system in our department that we use. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to share this part, and then I can pinch it, and you can see a little bit closer what I'm talking about. So does that help? Doing it like that? Okay, so ours, we have a very, in our faculty, we have a very clear system of how we do these things. So what I've done here is they've got the syllabus dot points with the names of it, so they correspond directly with the syllabus, and then we have indented, we give them the activities. And this corresponds with, so like I said, we use Canvas, so the page where they'll find this information in Canvas, so it's hyperlinked. And then over here, I set up my class notebook using OneNote, and their OneNote is where they do all their work, because that way I can see it in real time during lessons, and it matches up. So this is a year 11 one where I have, this is construction of modern histories for year 11. So they know exactly where everything lives. So when they take their notes, they put their notes on that page, and their activities goes on that page. And the activities, even though I'm showing you two different courses, so year 11 and year 12, these pages in the learning management system are the same pages copy pasted into the OneNote. So the kids there's no confusion as to what they're supposed to be doing. Then what they'll see when they open it up, so this is that year 11 course that I showed you in the OneNote, they'll open it up and they can see this is the first activity they do. So they're doing a See, Think, Wonder. Then the next one is they have to look at a picture from a ghetto. This is teaching with the Holocaust. And then they are going to do a more advanced. So it's scaffolded based on like the levels of thinking and the accessibility of the students. So it's naturally differentiated. And sometimes I will say to the kids, you're all going to work on this one right now. We're going to do it together. And some kids, I might send them a private message and say, for this lesson, I want you to be working on this specific activity. And it's very transparent, like, how difficult and where they are. But it is very easy for the kids to see what they do. And then in their OneNotes, what the kids will often do, and I don't do this for them, they will create like little insert checklist. So then they can tick the checklist as they complete the activities. So it is very structured, very scaffolded for their kids. Every single lesson is scaffolded the exact same way. They know where to go to get their work. They know where to go to get their lessons. There's no confusion. And it doesn't live in a thread. So I know, like, if you're using Teams to teach your class, is anybody in here using Teams? Yeah, so if you're using Teams, you will notice that there is the first thing in the team is like a forum style, like a thread. And if you're putting the work for the students in there, it's going to get lost in this, like a scroll of death. They're going to have to scroll so far. But if you give them in the classwork section just a table to let them know what they're supposed to do, it's very clear for the kids. So if they miss a lesson, if they miss a meeting, it's all there for them. So those are just a few examples of how you can make it very simple for the kids, to know where to find their work. And it sounds to me, by talking to teachers across the globe, really, because obviously I have a lot of teacher friends in the US, that is a huge problem. The kids just are lost, and that's how we manage it at our school and in our faculty. Does anyone have any questions with any of that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it looks to me like in an online environment, you just have to be a lot more explicit about the structure of the lessons. So things that might have come very naturally if you're on the floor of the classroom. Yeah, it feels
well, when
Sorry,
you're in the four walls of the classroom, you probably have a whiteboard that you're writing up your essential question or your big question. You're writing up your homework. You're writing up your where have we been to, where are we going to. You're writing up your agenda. You don't have that necessarily in your online classroom. Isabel, I think that most of this can transfer to primary. I mean, obviously the examples I'm showing you are secondary because that's what I teach. But I have primary teachers at my school. We are a 3 to 12 school, and this is the stuff that our primary teachers are doing. So like, yeah, I mean, obviously the examples I'm giving you are secondary, but they're doing it in primary as well. A lot of the same things. If you have a question about how it would work in primary, just turn on your mic and ask me. I could probably help you. So here's some examples of how you can run. So if you're running looking for opportunities to reflect. So I know all of these, depending on your platforms that you've been given access to, will work. So for example, warm-ups. Just like you probably do in your regular classroom, don't lose your warm-ups. It can be in a OneNote. It can be in a shared document. I know my son, he's in year 4. He uses Google Docs. So he's not obviously at my school, but his school is using Google Docs. So he puts his work up there. So don't give up on your warm-ups. Even if you're not going to see the kids face to face, give them a warm-up to do when it's time for them to do your lesson. It gets them ready for it, just like they do in the face-to-face. So for me, what I do is I have an ongoing warm-up that I do with my kids. It's a table, and I put the date in. I give them the activity I want them to do, and then I have a column for like feedback, or as we're going over it, they can take their own notes. Give them some revision questions. So if you're looking at, primary, it might be some revision on types of math or spelling. Or if you did looking at colonization and you were talking about reasons why people came to Australia on the first fleet, you can ask them to tell you 3 things they remembered from the previous lesson. I do that all the way up to my year 12. The question today was, what do they remember about Bolshevik ideology? So revision questions are really useful, and it helps the kids love them. Give time to organize and submit their work. Give them that time in class. If you wanted them to submit something, say, okay, you have 5 minutes right now to submit the activity that is due today. Or you have 5 minutes right now. Make sure that you know what we're supposed to be doing. Make sure you've reordered or organized your files. Games like Kahoot. Kahoot's great for a warm-up activity. Just keep in mind it takes a long time to set those up, so you need to make sure that if you do use those types of games, Quizlet, Kahoots, that you do them before the lesson starts, because it'll take way too long otherwise. Give them time to reflect on their work. So things like self-editing templates for writing tasks. I use something called Ladder of Feedback. Give them those opportunities to reflect on their own work. Give them metacognition questions. So I work with a primary teacher in another campus, and she's been doing metacognition in math by having the kids explain about their thinking. Explain how they worked something out, and then they have to, the next type of question might be, and this is across the board for any year level, any subject, have them write in what they've learned, how they've learned it, and where they think they need to go to next. So those are, just examples of how you can get the kids to think right now. Have them explain their thinking, how they solved an equation, make connections between ideas. So if you're giving them content, whatever it is, have them physically draw on the page how the content connects, and then that's how they're going to really display and make their thinking visible. Does anyone have any question Neil, so the ladder of feedback, what you do, you just basically have the kids, it's when they're sharing their work together, like as peer, you have them identify what they value in their peer's piece of work. Then they ask clarifying questions, and then they offer suggestions for improvement. So that's how it's like a template for peer feedback might work. When you add students to one, get a
Hey, April.
Yep.
It seems to me almost like, what in a classroom when you're like all those things that you can do to know that there is engagement, just by moving around the room, by using eye contact, by using gesture, you can just kind of sense the room, when there's engagement versus when there's not. It seems to me a lot of the activities that you're describing, it's sort of a lot of it seems to be about how do you get engagement through this online? If you're expecting students to do something, how are you able to notice that they're engaged and that they're doing something? So a lot of, the collaborative work and even seeing them, and obviously some schools can use the cameras and some schools can't. But however you do that, it feels to me like quite the challenge to actually run classes where you're able to get high levels of engagement with students working and knowing that they're being noticed, that they're working.
It's about that real time seeing. The best way to do it is being able to see what they're doing in real time. So that's why I would encourage collaborative documents. So whether it's collaborative between you and the student, so if they're using a Word document on like Google Docs, make sure that it's something that you've created or that you're shared into. So as they're working, you give them like a worksheet, like template, and they're filling it in, but you might have it opened and you're able to look at all the kids and you leave comments right then and there. So I usually just start typing and highlight what I'm typing, and then I do like a little dash, Mrs. T, smiley face. And so if you're while they're working, you're leaving them that feedback so they know you care and you're interested. When it comes to collaborative work, it's the same thing. You need to make sure you're shared into anything they're doing collaborative, so they shouldn't be working in something that you don't have visibility on, because you want to be able to pop into their work to see what they're doing and again leave that feedback. But that's the best way. If you can't see what they're doing, you have no way of knowing if they're actually doing what you want them to do. So Chrissy had a question about OneNote. That is my go-to. So I use collaboration space, content library, and class and the student individual notebooks. All their independent work goes in the individual notebooks. I have a content library, which is like the Blackline Masters from ages of old, that my teachers use, that they can copy from, but they can't edit on. So if they need to get their work from the lesson, they copy that and paste it into their OneNote. Collaboration space is where I set up pages for them in their groups. So, and I go through those, just one by one, just monitor it and go through. I leave feedback on it. I circle stuff. I'll put stickers in it. So if you're there and you're looking at their work, they will be more engaged. But I will say that I find that the best way to get engagement from the kids is to hold them accountable to themselves. If their peers are the ones expecting them to pull their weight, they're probably going to work a lot harder than if it's just you looking at their work. So I do collaborative work nearly every lesson, even if it's only for 15 minutes. Every single lesson I do collaboration. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Chrissy?
There was also a comment from Suzanne about students being hesitant to comment online. I can totally imagine that. I mean, I know my kids would be in that camp. I was just thinking, what are the ways to kind of maybe lower the bar a little in terms, for those kids who would be nervous about commenting?
It's all about positive feedback, frequent, constant positive feedback on the smallest of things. I have students that will now turn their mics on and you almost want them to not ask as many questions. But it is about setting, I'll get to the norms in a little while, but it's about setting your expectations in your classroom for what is acceptable and what is not. And don't let behavior that is not appropriate and disrespectful, don't let them get away with it. You call them out on it. you know, make jokes of it, use humor. I had a student earlier who was making a little jab at a friend about having like guns or something, like muscles. And then he started commenting about a fly in his house with like long legs. So then I was like, "Ooh, you got bugs in your house?" And I said, "See what happened there? You thought you could mess with him, and now you think that no one's going to mess with you." So we just, you know, using humor, but making sure they realize, no, I'm not going to let you pick on each other. And then you start to develop that. I mean, I've taught these kids now all year online, but you start to develop that relationship where it's trusting and they know that their input is going to be safe. But there is always the private chat. There is always their individual notebook where they're putting work in that is just for you. But it is baby steps with some of those kids. Don't force, you shouldn't force kids to, you know, share too much online, but give them the opportunity. Ask them how they're doing when they come in. Simple things like, "Hey, Megan, how are you today?" Rather than just ignoring when they come into the classroom. So
question from Harry, how do we manage live Google Docs to ensure the students are effective and accountable? I'm thinking about allocating names to work in a table.
That is, Harry, that is the best way that I have found, because like I said, I teach with OneNote, but the same principle applies. Whenever I have something that I'm going to let everybody see, so a jigsaw, for example, I will have a table and I'll put each kid's name in the table, and then I'll put the questions I want them to answer up the top, and they have to populate it. My number one reason for that is it gives me a clear snapshot of who's contributing to the lesson, but also it prevents them from overriding each other's work and creating those conflicts. So if you have a specific spot for them to write, you're going to reduce it. You won't get rid of it. They'll still be the kid that writes in somebody else's box and then the work disappears. I don't know why it happens. Like literally it's your name, follow the row. They will still make the mistakes, but you will minimize it. But I think that is an excellent idea, Harry. And like I said, there is nothing wrong with private comments if they're actually engaging with you. Opportunities for collaboration. So breakout rooms, you have that available. I am not as familiar with other video platforms. I use Zoom, but if you have something that is like a breakout room, use it, but don't use a breakout room without a collaborative document to accompany it, because otherwise you're not able to see what's happening in that breakout room or in that group activity. You need to have something that you can monitor separately as a collaborative document that they are inputting work into. It just helps you to kind of monitor what's going on in that room. And I personally keep it, I don't put like one boy and one girl in the room by themselves, just to be safe. Make sure, again, you're providing those step-by-step instructions that are very clear. They're written down ahead of time. I will even give them the URL in the chat, even though they know where to find it on the learning management system or in the OneNote. I still will give them the link, just so the kids, because you're going to have the kids, maybe, you know, kids that might be in learning support, or the kids that maybe weren't listening to what you said 5 times before. Put it in the chat and they'll be able to just link it. Set a time limit and stick to it. If you say you're going to give them 15 minutes, give them 15 minutes, bring them back in. If they need more time, give them more time then, but don't leave them hanging for a lengthy period of time, because you will have the groups that are done and don't want the more time, and they now need you to give them more direction. Make sure that you're holding them accountable for the work, so give them a chance to actually present, and when they present, just like you would do in your face-to-face, hold the other students accountable for taking notes or writing questions down. Something that they're doing doesn't have to be collaborative at that point, but it needs to be somewhere where you can actually see what they're doing. Any questions on any of that?
I think you nailed it. Everybody's gone quiet.
Hopefully that's a good thing. So we're going to play with breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is you are going to be assigned to a breakout room. And again, this is just for the purpose of an exercise of what the students feel like when you're doing these things. Miles is going to put you into a breakout room, and it's going to be completely random. In a class setting, you will probably decide who your groups are ahead of time. And all I want you to do is come up with one thing that you, maybe something I've just said, or maybe something that your brain's, oh, I just thought about that. As a group, one thing that you guys will commit to doing as you learn to navigate the online classroom that you weren't doing maybe before you came to this meeting, anything at all. And what you're going to do with that is you're going to go back to that Google Doc, that Miles shared with you before. So Miles, could you please put the URL back in the chat?
Sure.
Because it's now way up the top. And can you go to that Google Doc as a group, and there's a table that is already in there, very similar to the kind of table Harry was just describing, and it'll have the group names. So group 1 will tell you which groups when it's time to go into your breakout rooms. Miles will say group 1 will be people in the room with this.
Yep. So do you want me to open those rooms yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
So Miles will you'll go into the breakout rooms, and you'll the rooms that you're in, so groups will, and you'll go to that Google Doc, and you'll just put one thing into that collaboration, and you're going to just be given 2 minutes to do it. So it's just for the purpose of playing around with the tools and learning how to use it and feeling what the kids feel. Any questions on what you're going to be doing now? All right. So Miles, can you please open the rooms?
Okay.
So once you have the groups come back into the room, then you spend some time looking at their responses. So one thing that I have noticed is that there is a question about kindergartens. I think that's a really good idea. We have someone who's a kindergarten teacher in here who's just like, how in the world am I going to do this? There is a feature in Zoom that I will show you right now. That is a whiteboard. And if you are a teacher who is just wanting to show your kids stuff, you can do anything you want in drawing on a whiteboard. You can have them draw on the whiteboard and annotate. You'd be very surprised at how quick little kids pick up this stuff. Obviously, there's different levels of affluence out there and what they have access to at home. But the whiteboard can be something that would be very good. You could also share, how you open the whiteboard in the share at the bottom, there is a whiteboard. So you just click share and there's a whiteboard there. And so you might not be able to do it now, but when you open a Zoom, so you could share videos. So if you wanted to show the kids the younger kids a video and you want them to, I don't really know, you'd have to help me out there, want them to do something as they watch the video, maybe do like just write down everything they see and think about some questions they have. You could very easily do that by sharing your screen with your computer sound in Zoom. I'm sure the other platforms have something similar, and you could show them little videos, definitely reading books to the kids, using your whiteboard like you would the whiteboard in your regular classroom. I've seen some teachers be very creative with flipping their learning and teaching. I saw one actually using his refrigerator as a whiteboard. Well, with Zoom, you don't need to use your refrigerator as a whiteboard. You can just share your whiteboard and use that. So there are tools that you could probably be able to use for the same things that you use in your classroom, just on a screen.
Okay, there's a couple of questions there, April.
Yep.
So someone just asking how you open whiteboard. That's just one of the share screen options, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's, does everybody know how to do that now? I mean, you have to probably play around with it. So at the bottom of Zoom, there's just this green button that has an arrow, and I'm not sure if you're seeing it right now. Yeah, when you click that, you can share a whiteboard. It's just one of the ways you can share your screen. It's just called Whiteboard. On Microsoft programs, there's a whiteboard as well that you can get, and you can just share that as your screen.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
With the share screen and how you click whiteboard, is that the same way you share the PowerPoint that you've been sharing?
That's right. So anything that you share, just be mindful that I don't ever share my desktop in front of anyone, because if you share your desktop and an email pops up, the kids can see it. And if you have secondary kids, they're going to take a print screen of what your emails were as soon as your email pops up. So you just want to make sure you're only sharing the screen you want them to share. Now with the whiteboard though, people can annotate on it. So you can right now, I've got it sharing, there is a feature up there that you can actually start to annotate. You just have to click annotate and you can start writing all over this whiteboard right now. Anybody can do that, see? And so there's no reason why, just because you teach younger kids, what would you do in your regular classroom? A lot of these tools can be transferred. The stuff that I was talking about with collaborative documents, that's to try to get to try to build that engagement and to get them to to collaborate, because they're starved for that at this point. They're starved for that socialization, and they're thinking. I know my son is getting to the very bored stage. So that's just the way to try to push them past just you delivering content. But this is another way that you can get the younger kids would love this. I saw some of my primary students in year 3 earlier on campus. They're not here, but the teacher is, and they were just drawing hearts. That's what they were doing, drawing hearts all over their whiteboard. So, and then as the teacher, I just quickly press stop share, and it's safe. If anybody starts to draw something that's not appropriate, because year 9 boys tend to want to do that, just stop share immediately, and it saves it. And in the Zoom account settings, you can actually make it so that their annotations have their name on them. So as they're annotating, you can see who is annotating, so there's no secrets. And
so
then
that was just up in the, there was a little drop down, wasn't there? Up in the view settings where you can do the annotate. That's great.
Yeah. So does that help? I don't know who it was that was the kindergarten teacher that was asking
That was me. Sorry.
Does that help you?
It does a bit, yeah. It's just unfortunate at this time that we've only done 1 term of school for kindergarten, and it's very hard at the moment.
I feel for you. It is. Yeah.
Someone in the chat was asking whether you can recommend an input drawing device.
Input drawing device for what purpose?
So I tried a document camera, was not convinced with autofocus and lighting situations, something like an Apple Pencil, but for my desktop.
Okay, so I've used what's it called, a Wacom tablet. So I have one of those. But my current laptop just has a pen that lives in the side of the laptop. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so. That was Harry.
My Wacom is probably older because I don't have to use it anymore, but it's just one that I bought at the Apple store.
Okay. Also, share options for Whiteboard are only available for the teacher. The kids can't open it. Is that right?
You lock it down in your settings.
Okay.
Yeah, you fix your settings for what you want the kids to access. There's a setting where the kids can't share their screen. I personally don't do that. I like my kids to share their screen because I want them to share their thinking and their work. I do a lot of trying to make thinking visible. So if they can't share their screen, and I try to create a classroom where they feel safe that they can share it in front of their peers. But you can lock all that down, or you can open it.
There's one more question back up in the chat, and then we'll let you get on your flow again. So the issue of collaborative documents, how to manage students deleting others' work and writing on top of one another, etc. Or how to teach them that kind of online etiquette, I guess.
That is about setting those clear expectations and those norms for behavior, making sure that whatever you're using, that they are signed into it and you can see who's doing what. Using those tables of each kid knowing where they are supposed to write, you keeping an eye on it at all times. So like if you're using OneNote, close your collaborations if you don't feel the kids are mature enough to not disrupt. And a lot of times, some of the programs have the ability for you to go back and look at previous versions. So you can go back and take the stuff and put it back in. That's how you would, but a lot of it's just monitoring when you're using it. Just have a few more tips for you. Stick to lesson structure. So warm up, teacher overview, activity, Q&A, that's my structure. I do it, every lesson has the same structure. This does help prevent misbehavior. I write my lessons down in a daybook now. I went completely digital. I'm like a digital native. I went digital and I had things all online, but something had to give. So I just have my daybook and I write in pencil. 1, 2, 3, the steps. I write it down. Give yourself a break. Teaching like this can be cognitive overload. You will be exhausted. The more you can simplify, the better. And that's one way I simplify is everything's on paper next to me. Have everything open that you want to use before you begin. So it's going to reduce your stress. So if you aren't looking for that file, if you're not looking for that website or that video, if it's just there and you just say, okay, I'm just going to share my screen and it's done, that will reduce a lot of your stress. Just some might seem obvious, but people don't do it. These are just some of those tips for Zoom. Enable the waiting room. This prevents your unwanted visitors. There's been a lot about Zoom bombing lately. That's a very easy way to prevent it. And set a norm that your students have to use their first and last names. So you don't let anyone into your classroom unless it's a student on your roll and their first and last name. Turn the play sound on. So when the participants leave or exit the Zoom, that's just for you to know if there's someone in the waiting room. And if someone leaves, it gives you, oh, somebody's left. Who's left? Who's left the class? So, but don't make it so the participants can hear. You don't want them to be distracted by people knocking on the door and slamming the door at the end. Enable nonverbal feedback. A lot of my kids like to tell me they're drinking coffee in their nonverbal feedback. So just allow them to use that. If a kid is naughty, put them in the waiting room. That is just a signal for them that they had to take a step outside of the classroom. If you remove them, they can't get back into the meeting. So don't remove students unless you really, really want to remove them. Like I already said that, if you're allowed at your school, make them turn their cameras on. It's really good to see facial expressions and body language. It's how you connect with your kids. If you use breakout rooms, decide your groupings, try to do that beforehand, set timers, prevent them from going back into the main session. If they're in the breakout room and you join it to just kind of like answer some questions or see how they're going, you could have like 3 kids go back into the main session and have a little mini party without you. So if you make it so they can't go back into the main session, they're stuck in their rooms and you know where they are. I just joke with mine and tell them they're grounded until I let them out. Allow the chat. Chat's great, but restrict them from private messaging each other. So right now you guys can probably private message each other. I'm not sure how this meeting is set up, but it's best not to let the kids do that because that's how you run the risk of like some of that cyberbullying stuff happening. So just restrict the private chat to either you or everyone publicly. Here is an example of what that one of the screens looks like. So host video on, participants video. So that's one of the screens. I don't ever use my personal meeting room ID because I don't want kids calling me when I'm just like off class. So I set up new meetings for every single one of my classes. Allowing the chat. I don't let them save the chat. Yeah, there's the sound one. That's what that looks like. This is me earlier trying to give you a screenshot of how to do breakout room settings. So I'm looking very enthused in my photo. So what you'll see here is I move the participants to breakout rooms automatically. Some of you would have found that you might have been stuck in a breakout room all by your lonesome because your partner didn't ever come. So if you move them automatically, they don't have a choice to stay in the main session. They got to go. Here I've ticked allow them to return to the main session. So when I'm teaching, I usually untick that one so they have to stay. You can give them that they close automatically after 20 minutes. So if you're not very good at watching the clock and timing because there's so much other stuff going on, put the automatic on. And if you say, okay, they're going to get 15 minutes, put it on 15 minutes and they will close automatically after 15 minutes. And then you can set your countdown timer. So this time I think you had 60 seconds. Was that right, Miles? After the breakout rooms?
That's right.
Yeah, so you can change that to whatever period of time. I think it's 15-second intervals. So that's just a little screenshot of what it looks like when you create your rooms and how you can do the settings and change them. This is what an example of one of my lessons, I don't know, was that yesterday, I think? Take 2 days, yeah, yesterday. So this is me running this is an actual Zoom meeting that I was running. I had 4 kids in each of those rooms. Obviously, I closed them so you can't see their names. If I want to go between, I just click join. Broadcasting is a message. It's a one-way message that will go to all of your students. It does have a character limit. So I might just say, okay, guys, 5 minutes. Make sure you're putting your work into OneNote. So you just put a message one way. If you're going to give them more time, you can say, okay, I can see you guys need more time, 5 more minutes. So whatever you want to do, it's one way. But this is how I was doing it. So my students were doing a presentation research together, and this is their work in OneNote, and I just left them a little bit of feedback as, like I said to you guys, I do, and I highlight it. So then they left me a little message underneath. So I said, I've emailed and told her you girls were happy for her to join because we had a student that was having a hard time getting on because her internet was bad. So then we just had, and then the other girl was able to go straight into this. So that's just what it looks like. This down here is that nonverbal feedback that the kids can, you know, right now you're probably saying go slower because I'm starting to talk fast because we're running out of time. I think we have run out of time.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
actually just on that, April, I might just jump in for a moment. Just watching the chat there, I just thought I'd make a couple of comments. One, clearly there's a bit of chat about everyone is using different tools. Everybody in different departments has different settings and opportunities to change things and adjust things. So you're all going to, you know, you're going to be in slightly different spots in terms of what's possible. Also, I think to keep in mind, you know, what we've got here is April, who has spent years learning how to do this and gain this incredible fluency. I think you said to me the other day, April, you had effectively several weeks of professional development to gain all these skills. So I just wanted to bring the point of view, hey, we're getting great, sort of a whole lot of great stuff from April. She's skimming over a lot because she knows so much. Some of these things, like I can feel, we want to say, hey, April, can you just stop and give me 15 minutes on that one sentence that you just mentioned there? Some of them might just at this point be either ideas that you can go find out more about because you know that that's now possible, that thing that April just mentioned or that idea. But also down the track, we will try to get some more detailed PD together. Now that I've discovered April, we'll try to get some more step-by-step stuff. So just keeping in mind that this is 1 hour to try to pack in as much as possible. So, you know, even if you just take that high-level stuff at this point of structuring and so forth, and some of these other things, well, I guess is about helping to let you know what's possible, like when you do really start to go deeper into building some fluency with all those tools. So, but I think also, April, just carry on. I think if we go a little overtime, then if some people need to go, that's fine. You will get the recording later on as well. But yeah, I would just, if you've got another 10 or 15 minutes, April, that's
I'm good.
fine. Yeah.
And I saw a message in the chat about one of you is having the department locks down. So just like I said, try to just be creative. And based on what Miles just said, trial and error, don't be afraid to fail. As an online teacher, you will fail and you will beat yourself up. And, you know, I'm looking at Lisa right now. She's on my screen. She has worked at my school, and the amount of times that you will finish the day feeling like you accomplished absolutely nothing, and you will feel like a complete failure, and you will cry to your friends and want to throw your computer across the wall. These are the realities, but every day is new. So just allow yourself to fail. You're showing up. And this is kind of the end. The last thing is just creating that safe virtual environment. So setting those clear norms. You need to make them very clear and explicit, even if you have to type them up and put them somewhere and have them in your LMS for the kids to see at all times. So things like using nonverbal cues. It is the weirdest thing that since the whole world has gone online, thumbs up is like the new thing. We do that at my school. Is everybody going good? Thumbs up. It's weird. Like, why do we always do that? But you create those nonverbal cues. Things like using full names I mentioned before. If you're allowed to have the students keep their cameras on, I know my daughter is in the public school, she's not allowed to have cameras on, but if you are, use them. But make sure the kids are in a solid background, just as a little tip there. Since our students have gone home, I've had to remind kids, hey, we don't need to see your bed, like turn to a blank wall. So just make sure they're also safe what they're showing. So a blank wall is always really good. Making sure they arrive on time, having those warm-up activities will help with that. They'll know that they're going to miss out on something, and they don't like coming into a Zoom or a lesson that whatever you're using after you've already started talking. It's very awkward for them. Say hello to every single kid every single day when they come into your lesson. If they come in after you started the warm-up, my warm-up time is silent. So because I'm really big on giving everyone the chance to think, and that thinking time needs to be quiet. There's nothing worse than being a student and having the teacher constantly talking while you're trying to do the work. So mics go off, including mine. But if a kid comes into the meeting late, I send them a private message saying, hey, welcome to class. How you doing today? Yeah, good, thanks, miss. And then I say, we're on the warm-up. You've got 2 minutes left. So still engage with the kids if they run late, but maybe just don't always turn the mic on if other kids are working. that end of the lesson, you know, thanks guys. You know, I tell my kids how proud I am probably every lesson. You know, when they do something amazing, this collaborative, really big routine that takes a lot of thinking and collaboration, I just say, I'm like, guys, that was amazing. I'm so proud of you, what you did there. And I name what they did. I notice what they did. It's that lovey-dovey type stuff. I don't know if you're comfortable with it. If there's a couple people in here that know me, I am definitely that type of person, but if you can get comfortable with that positive reinforcement and praise, and just lay down some law on how to use the chat if you're going to open it. That the chat is only for class-related stuff. It's not a chance to talk about the football scores. It's not a chance to ask someone where their dog is. The chat is a place to ask questions. The chat is a place to, if you're all working and somebody found a great website to share with the rest of the class, put the URL in it. The chat is, if somebody asks a question in the chat, one of their classmates might be able to answer. So just make sure that you are very, very clear in expectations of how the chat is used. And if they abuse it, give them a warning and then turn the chat off. Take it away from them for the rest of the lesson if they're not using it. The second part of that is just don't forget about your student voice. Don't leave them out of the equation. Ensure that all students have access to asking for help or share their thinking. Give them opportunities to speak during the lesson. Don't force it, but give them the opportunity. Use the chat to message you. Like I said, I lock it down. They only can message me privately or everyone, but they can't message each other. And make it clear that your expectation around giving everyone time to think and to share. Give them the chance, you know, to say, is there anyone who wants to share their work? Does anyone want to share their work? And you might get crickets, and I'll say, ooh, and that's what I actually say. Ooh, there's crickets in the room today here, nothing. But eventually, once you start to show them that it's safe and that you will praise the people that share their vulnerabilities, that you'll start to get more kids that will be willing to do it, so long as it's all about that positive praise. A lot of clapping. Everybody turn your mic on, and that was awesome what so-and-so just shared with us. Turn your mics on and clap for them. You know, silly things like that can really help them to feel more comfortable. So that is the end of my massive, hopefully I gave you some practical advice, which is what I do. Does anyone have any questions right now for me?
Last chance before we wrap up. I think we're getting lots of thanks from everybody, which is totally a pro. Thumbs up. Yeah.
Thumbs up.
And we got thumbs up from everybody. That's so cool. I think we all should follow April's advice. Turn our mics off, give her a little clap. Well done, April. That was fantastic. I'm going to be aware of everybody's time. I'm going to just dive in, share my screen, and say thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Of course, thank you so much to April, who has packed in so much value in such a short time. Yeah, look, I hope that you got a lot out of this. I really admire what you guys are doing right now. It's not easy. Hopefully over the Easter break, you'll get a chance to practice some of these things and come back with a few more skills after Easter. And hopefully you do get a nice rest as well. In terms of next steps, we will see what we can do about getting April to produce a little bit more PD for us, because I think that she's got a whole lot more to offer. But if you get lost, or if you want to go back and have a look, we've got 3 other webinars that have now been produced. You can find all those at tta.edu.au. Hopefully it's clear how to get those there. And then also next week, we're going to do one more on basically on how different schools are adapting, which should be fantastic. We've got some teaching and learning leaders from, I think, 5 different schools who are going to share their ideas. So until then, thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks again to April, and thanks to you all. Cheers for now.